What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Arnold coming back for another episode of History Comes Alive. And for today's History Comes Alive episode, ladies and gents, we are going to be looking at the French Revolution, ladies and gents, the French Revolution. And we're going to separate this video into 4 distinct segments. We're going to first look at the causes of the French Revolution. Why did it occur in the first place? And then the next 3 segments, we're going to be looking at the 3 main phases of the French Revolution. The first phase is going to look primarily at the National Assembly and the way that it was formed, the storming of the Bastille. The second phase is going to look more in depth at the Reign of Terror, dum dum dum. And then the third phase will talk about the new France that is essentially made with Napoleon Bonaparte. All right, Napoleon. All right. But make sure you guys are paying close attention. There's a lot of great stuff in this video that will help you out in maybe a test or a quiz. So strap on that seatbelt again, ladies and gents, and get ready for the ride. What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Arnold sliding back in here for the second segment. In the second segment, we're going to be talking about the 4 parts to the causes of the French Revolution, ladies and gents. So make sure you're paying attention. This is really important because it's going to tell us why France revolted in the first place. Keep that in mind. It's going to tell us why they revolted in the first place. The first part to this segment is understanding the background knowledge. Who's involved and who is not involved, okay? In France, it was a country that was divided into 3 different estates, so to speak. Pretty much kind of social classes in a way. All right, keep in mind it's going to be a kind of slight variation from social classes. The head of France, ladies and gents, is an absolute monarch. We know absolute monarchies are governments that have a head of the government, whether that's a king or a queen or an emperor or empress, who basically control everything. In France, they have one of these. His name's Louis XVI. He's not a very good absolute ruler. He's very weak. He's indecisive. He's not very smart. And as a result, ladies and gents, people of France are going to see their opportunity to spark change. Whenever we talk about revolutions, ladies and gents, keep in mind the term change in your cabezas, your noggins there. That's important. All right? King Louis XVI, as I mentioned, he's the absolute ruler. He lives at the Palace of Versailles. He's noted for having a very lavish lifestyle alongside his beautiful wife, Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, kind of the antagonist of the French Revolution, all right? Marie Antoinette is going to come over from Austria. She's going to marry King Louis XVI, and it's going to be seen as an alliance between the 2 countries. But the thing to keep in mind with the royal family is this, is that they're coming into France during a period of turmoil and distress and chaos. People want change, primarily the Third Estate. So let's jump back into the estates and let's talk about this. France is separated into 3 estates. The first estate being the clergy, high-ranking officials of the Catholic Church. The second estate being nobility. In France, we still see manors as well as feudalism arise, in which peasants, poor peasants and farmers live off the land that is owned by nobility. Okay, keep that in mind. And then last but not least, the third estate, which makes up 97%. That's a lot of people in France. They make up the third estate, and they're essentially commoners. They range from very poor people, like peasants, all the way to people that are high-ranking officials, like we'll say bankers or merchants, or they could be middle-class people, everyday people, such as the bourgeoisie. So keep in mind the dynamic that's involved here. What's going on in France? People are starting to get upset. There's some grumblings and some gripes that are starting to form. And now that there's a weak ruler, France now has the opportunity to revolt. Keep that in mind. So that's the first part of the second segment. Woo. The second part of the second segment is going to deal with the financial problems that France is going to basically develop over time. King Louis XIV and XV, who came before King Louis XVI, remember the king of the French Revolution, basically drowned France in debt and bankrupted it based off of 2 things. The first thing is the lavish lifestyle that they carried out here at Versailles, as well as the overseas spending on war, is what you see here between the continents of Europe, America, and Africa, okay? It costs lots of money to maintain an army and fight wars all throughout the world, and that's what King Louis XIV and XV and XVI were trying to do, which will ultimately bankrupt France. In addition to the financial problems that exist, most people in France are starting to starve to death and die of hunger. Why? Because in France there's not enough food to go around for that population. The population's growing, and during this growth in population, we actually hit a bad harvest year. And as a result, bread, one of the key staples to any French person's diet, is going to soar in terms of price. It's going to be inflated in terms of price, and it will cause chaos and looting in the streets. As a result, people cannot feed themselves, and they grow weary and restless of the French government, who is spending lots of money on their own personal tastes, such as building the Palace of Versailles or throwing extravagant parties in the Hall of Mirrors. So that's the second part right there, ladies and gents. The third part is going to deal with the Age of Enlightenment, the role the Age of Enlightenment played. During the Age of Enlightenment, certain things such as reason were discussed, as well as the purpose of government. We have important speakers or individuals arise, such as Baron de Montesquieu, Voltaire, John Locke. These people are going to motivate the French people, primarily the middle class of France and the third estate, the bourgeoisie, to revolt and spark change. Remember, when we talk about revolutions, we're talking about change, a quick, sudden period of change, and it could be either political, economic, or social, this change, this revolution, all right? So that's the third part right there. Remember, the role of the Age of Enlightenment and what it played within the French Revolution. Last but not least, we're going to talk about the role the Americans played for the French Revolution. The French people saw the success of the American Revolution. It occurred before the French Revolution, ladies and gents. And the French people kind of saw it and said, hey, we could probably do that. And as a result, they were saying, hey, we ended up doing it, okay? The French people were motivated from the American people and how they essentially provided liberties and freedoms to everybody in America, all right? France, the people of France, became motivated and saw themselves being able to do that, and ultimately motivated their interests. All right, guys, that's all I have for this segment, ladies and gents. We're going to go into our next segment that's talking about the first phase of the French Revolution. I'm going to slide on out of here, and I'll be jumping in the next segment. See you guys later. What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Arnold jumping into this second segment. And in the second segment, we are going to be discussing the first phase of the French Revolution, all right? Now, remember, during the French Revolution, before it, all right, there's many causes, all right? And one of the things King Louis XVI is going to do that King Louis XV did not do and King Louis XIV did not do is call for a meeting at the Estates General, all right? The legislative body of France that's really supposed to check King Louis XVI and his power. This is the first time in 170 plus years that any king of France will call for the Estates General. The Estates General, remember, is going to be made up of the first estate, the clergy, the second estate, nobility, and last but not least, the third estate, which is everyone else, all right? Keep in mind that each of those estates have the same say. So even though the clergy is a representative of 1% of the country and nobility is representative of 2% of the country, and then last but not least, the third estate represents 97%, they all get the same say. Isn't that kind of cray-cray? Keep that in mind. All right, now, when we talk about this, all right, King Louis is going to call for them to air their grievances. Basically, come up with booklets that talk about their grievances. King Louis XVI doesn't really take it into account because on one day, what he dares to do is essentially he locks out the third estate from the Estates General. He really only listens to the first and second estate. As a result, he locks out the third estate. From this, the third estate gets very upset, and 576 of the 577 members of the third estate that belong to the Estates General, say that 5 times fast, they go meet in a handball court and take part in what's called the tennis court oath, in which they vie to create a republic, a form of democracy in France, a form of a legislative body in France that is solely based on the people of the third estate. What they plan on doing is creating a type of government that will limit King Louis XVI and his absolute power. The National Assembly will be formed, and it will be the first legislative body of France created to try and institute a constitutional monarchy, ladies and gents. From this basic event, people in France grow very upset with King Louis XVI. They see him as an antagonist, just like they do with his wife, Marie Antoinette. Remember, people in France want to get rid of the old France. What happens is a large group of people from Paris, they all storm the Bastille. The Bastille, ladies and gents, was a huge fortress, a huge armory, in which many people without guns, who supported the revolution, basically went into and claimed it as themselves. Essentially, what was taken out was lots of weapons that could be used for the revolutionaries. The king's army was unable to defend the Bastille, and eventually all the prisoners from the Bastille, were taken out. And the Bastille was taken down brick by brick by brick. Imagine that. This big building was taken down brick by brick by brick. And the reason why it was taken down was this reason right here. That it represented old France, and it represented the power of King Louis XVI. Many of the people, like Voltaire, were imprisoned in this terrible place of the Bastille and tortured for what they believed in and what they thought was right. They did not have the freedom of speech or press back then. So if you spoke out against Louis, you were sent to the Bastille and tortured in some ways. So in a way, it's like when Forrest Gump tears down Jenny's old childhood home, which brought many bad memories. The French people were liberating themselves from the Bastille and the bad memories that it was associated to. Keep that in mind, ladies and gents. And that is going to lead eventually into the second phase with the Reign of Terror, when we start to see people like King Louis and all the people that support him, the royalists in France, executed for their beliefs. That's all I have for this second segment, ladies and gents. We're going to jump into the second phase of the French Revolution with our next segment. All right? Make sure you're watching for that one. It'll be a good one. What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Arnold running back in for this third segment. In this third segment, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at the second phase of the French Revolution. And in the second phase of the French Revolution, we are going to start to see some extremism take place. Lots of blood is starting to be shed at this point. We are talking about the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror was the period in the French Revolution, ladies and gents, when we see people who were basically, we'll say, said to have been a royalist, said to have been someone who supported the king or queen. They would be taken out from their homes or places of business, and they'd be publicly executed through the guillotine. And this is important to keep in mind, because during the Reign of Terror, we are going to be obsessed with, you guessed it, change, Change. However, France is starting to try to go to the extreme side of things, We have people such as the great incorruptible Maximilien Robespierre, a leader, a lawyer during this time period, who sparked the many interests of France by basically exalting the individual, the community over the individual. He said that the community is more important than the individual, and that a person that has individual interests should be considered to be an enemy of France. And people who were considered to be an enemy of France essentially were executed. Based off of what you are seeing here, I think it's pretty easy to say that you know that King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette will someday meet their fates, through the guillotine. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, when things were getting very, very bad, they tried to flee to enter Austria and basically seek some security and safety from the neighboring countries, as well as ask for help on how to put down the revolution. Remember, most of Europe is still absolute monarchs as well, so they're going to try and put down this revolution in a way, or help out France, because they could be the next ones to come in the line. Keep that in mind. So King Louis is going to try and leave, and essentially he's tried for treason and then later found guilty and must be subject to punishment through guillotine, with his head being chopped off and rolling. All right. Between this time here, it is said to have been 20,000 to 40,000 deaths by the guillotine in public executions. It was said to have been a humane way to die back then. All right, to do these things publicly. But Mr. Arnold thinks, as well as you should think, is that it was a period of fear, that anybody associated to a counter-revolution, that means someone that goes against a revolution, might be subject to death by the guillotine. Keep that in mind. The Reign of Terror was a time period in which Robespierre ushered in fear. As you can probably guess, Robespierre is going to be subject to a thing called karma. Eventually, his followers turn their backs on him and essentially tell him that he must die by guillotine. All right. Eventually, Robespierre is put down, and France begins to enter a period of some stability. All right. After Robespierre dies, all right, the National Convention, which was formed by him, which is the new legislative body of France, the new Republic of France. We know a republic is a group of elected officials. That Republic of France will kind of be in charge for a little bit, all right? Eventually, a directory is in place where we start to see individuals, a group of individuals run kind of similar to an oligarchy. However, that fails again, and we are going to talk about Napoleon eventually in our next segment. But the big thing to keep in mind, ladies and gents, is Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre, and how he was pushing for the individual over the community. Community over the individual. And how he wanted the enemies of France to be exterminated, okay? Through the guillotine. All right, that's all I have for you for this segment, ladies and gents. Next segment, we are going to be talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. I'll see you guys for that next segment. What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Arnold coming back in this fourth and final segment. We're going to try and keep it kind of small here, okay? Kind of quick, okay? So, after the Reign of Terror, all right? After the Reign of Terror, there's about 5 years in which France kind of settles down. However, they still need a leader to kind of pick France back up into becoming the modern European power that it once was, ladies and gents. And this is where we're going to start to see Napoleon Bonaparte come into the light, come to the forefront, and be that great leader that France needs desperately. Napoleon, ladies and gents, he is a celebrated war hero, and eventually he becomes a council of 3 individuals. After he's able to basically defeat the other 2 councils using his popularity, he claims himself Emperor of France and takes France to heights it has never seen before. France expands all throughout Europe into current places like Italy, as well as Spain, some parts of Spain, as well as Eastern Europe. And ladies and gents, Napoleon is going to try and build his empire into places France has never been to before, such as the Netherlands. And he's going to go to war with Russia, as well as have some qualms and beefs with England, ladies and gents. But the big thing to keep in mind about Napoleon during the French Revolution is that he's going to be able to provide stability. He's going to be that individual, that leader that France needed in a time of chaos. Keep that in mind. Napoleon is eventually going to have many downfalls associated to his reign and rule. And ladies and gents, because of this, we are going to see the Congress of Vienna step in and essentially give power to all the countries in Europe, give equal power to all those countries. Napoleon did lots of good things though, such as creating the Napoleonic Code, which issued basically religious tolerance, something that hadn't been practiced in France for a very long time, as well as provide free schooling and education to lots of people in France. All right, that's all I have for you for this episode of History Comes Alive. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you hit like or comment if you guys get the opportunity. I'll check you guys out next time. See you guys later.